first game of the season, September 3rd, LSU, Florida State in Orlando. So, you guys kind of in theory get to have the pseudo home game this time around because it's close to your house instead of being in New Orleans like it was last year. Now, that game was, of course, wild. It was a 24-23, the block kick and just all the just shenanigans going on. I'm putting together my preview for each conference, and I'll put it out there now. I have both you and LSU leading your conferences this year. So this game is going to be pivotal on who gets a playoff spot, at least guaranteed, because I believe the winner will most likely go undefeated this season. The loser will probably only have one loss and still win their conference. But it's going to be intriguing. When it comes to Florida State, what do you think you all need to do to win this game? Because luckily, both of you are bringing back the quarterbacks from last year. You're kind of the few teams out there in college football that has a veteran QB presence, while Florida State also brought back dang near the entire defense and like the whole team. So how you all feeling? What do you think you all need to do on the offensive side and defensive side to win this game?
Yeah, I think the game really comes down to, and probably for both teams, right? I know you didn't ask me from the LSU perspective, but probably for both teams, it probably comes down to limiting the other team's X factor. And so I think that, like you mentioned, both teams bring back a veteran quarterback. Both teams bring back a lot of production on both sides of the ball. Both teams are ultra talented, really kind of everywhere. But yeah, when Florida State's on offense, I'm wondering where Harold Perkins and Mason Smith are every single play, right? Like, and I know Mason Smith's in the middle of the defensive line every time, so maybe that's an easy one. But I am making sure that blocking assignment to send an extra guy his way is legit. Now, Florida State likes to run the counter a lot, and so getting to the outside is not typically too. They don't try to go up the middle a ton, and so maybe that helps with that issue just a tad. True. But yeah, it is limiting the production, the superstar ability of Harold Perkins, and making sure that Mason Smith isn't just an absolute monster. I know he's been held out of some practices precautionarily. You don't necessarily like to hope that a guy's hurt or anything like that, but I do hope he's 100% for week 2 is all I'll say. Like, after he plays, but now, like, all jokes aside, like, you got to limit those X factors. I think that Harold Perkins is the kind of guy that could have literally like 4 sacks and a strip and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. And you're just like, oh, that's our Harold Perkins. So like, if he does that, they're winning the game, right? Like, so, I mean, but like, by the same token, they probably say the same thing about Jared Verse. So I think that it's limiting the X factor. And then same thing when Florida State's on defense. I mean, this is no shot at Jaden Daniels. I think Jordan Travis is a slightly better quarterback than Jaden Daniels. I mean, he's got slightly better Heisman odds. I think he was just more consistent last year than Jaden was, but I still think Jaden is like top 10 in the country. Like, I don't know, that's not a shot at him. I think Jordan's a little bit better, but I think Jaden's still an X factor. And how well does Florida State look to control his legs? Do they spy him? I think Kalen DeLoach should be a really, really good option. Florida State's like 5th-year senior linebacker. How do they look to defend him? I like Florida State's secondary against LSU's wideouts, not to shut them down or hold them with that, but I like that matchup. I think we'll do a good job there. But man, if he takes off a few times and breaks off a 40-yard run or a couple of 20-yard runs, or how does that change the game? So it's limiting those X factors to me. And again, that's probably the same thing for LSU. It's how do they limit Jaheim Bell? How do they limit, Florida State's wideouts and kind of the X factors that the Noles have on that side? So whoever does a better job of that.
No, I definitely agree with you there. And having Jordan Travis and the combo of him and Keon Coleman, which is probably the combo I want to see lock up this year, it's going to be a fascinating setup. In the run game, though, who's in the backfield right now for Florida State that everyone needs to pay attention to? Because I know there's been some movement, but what does it look like there for you all, especially going into this game?
Yeah, so Trey Benson, I saw Pro Football Focus, and people either love PFF or hate it, but Pro Football Focus has Trey Benson as their RB1 for this next year's upcoming draft, which is nuts to me. I certainly thought he was like top 10-ish in the country. I didn't know that I would put him at top 1. But Trey Benson's Florida State's running back. He ran for 990 yards last year, fell just short of that 1,000-yard mark, but really didn't start getting rushing attempts until week 3 or 4 or 5. Like Treshaun Ward was kind of your number 1 all year. And, Benson had some monster games against Miami and Florida down the stretch, and was really pretty key for Florida State throughout the year. I think that he's somebody that the Noles have a ton of confidence in. Lawrence Toafili backs him up. He was, a really good second, third option for the Noles last year, and they like some of their young guys as well. But as much as we mentioned Jane Daniels' legs, Jordan Travis can take off and do some pretty ridiculous things on the ground as well. If you watch that Florida game, he did some things that were nuts. And so I think that in the backfield, the running options are pretty plentiful.
Yeah, and then one thing I did notice about you all is you have very much a big veteran presence on the offensive line, and really redshirt juniors and seniors. So a seasoned offensive line feels like that's all you need to have in order to be successful in this game against LSU, especially as you made mention, stopping Harold Perkins, stopping Mason Smith. If you can slow them down, it feels like this is your to win. And the Trayshawn Ward piece is kind of shocked me that he transferred out, but at the same time, as Trey Benson is like RB1 for the draft, yeah, he's probably going to lose his job, even though a nice 1-2 punch would have been great to have. We totally get it. Okay. Wrapping up, what do you think is the final score of that game, and what do you think the record is for Florida State to end the season?
So, yeah, I think Florida State wins that game. Maybe I'm a homer. I'm wearing an FSU shirt right now, though. So, shirt and certainly going to kind of lean towards FSU. But like I said, I think Jordan Travis is slightly better. I think Florida State's weapons on the offensive side of the ball are slightly better. You mentioned Keon Coleman. I mentioned Jaheim Bell. We didn't mention the 6'7" Johnny Wilson, who
was a nightmare for us in the Cheez-It Bowl. I remember.
He didn't even do anything in the LSU. I think he had like 2 catches. So I think that Florida State on the offensive side of the ball is a nightmare for teams. You mentioned the offensive line; they're the most veteran offensive line that's ever existed. They have more snaps combined than any other offensive line since I think they started keeping the snaps. So maybe there's something back in before 1980 or something, but they're a ridiculously veteran offensive line. I think they'll be top 20-ish in the country. I don't think they're the best, but I think they are really, really talented and top third or so of college football. And then on defense, I do really like their X factors, but I know that they've got some concerns at defensive back. And so I think that lends itself to, as long as special teams there were 2 muffed punts in this game last year. There was a blocked field goal, a blocked point after a touchdown that everybody remembers. Certainly special teams and X factors could make a difference. But if everybody kind of plays a clean game and plays a bit up to their ability and everything else, I think the Noles win something like 31-24. I don't think it's a blowout. I don't think it's, I don't think either team runs away with it. But I think the Noles are a little bit better than LSU at a lot of spots. You said it's kind of the quasi home game. I think LSU doesn't get revenge from last year. And the Noles find a way to win it. I've got 11-1. It's really hard to predict 12-0. I think the most likely place to stumble is going up at Clemson 3 weeks later. Wouldn't be shocked at all if Florida State was to lose that game on the road in Death Valley. I think they've lost 7 games there the last 10 years or something ridiculous. We were one of them, but it's a hard place to play. It wouldn't shock me at all if Florida State lost that one in a rematch in December in Charlotte to go to the playoff. I don't know that I'm predicting 12-1 ACC champs playoff yet, but I think they've got a good chance to do it. I think they beat LSU and then probably get tripped up one game along the way somewhere.
I like that as well. I mean, the bigger problem is that it's back-to-back traveling weeks. You go to Boston College first, and then you travel to Clemson. And so Boston College fights you all hard. I think it's because of the color schemes being similar. They like to give you guys problems. Exactly. That's exactly what they are. So, no, I appreciate you jumping on, TJ. Double Fries, No Slaw. Go check them out. They make some amazing content. I'm trying to grow up and be like them. But TJ, man, thanks a bunch for pulling up and talking ball with me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Appreciate you a ton. Always a blast. And good
luck
this year, man. Go get it.